The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Geoff Thompson, the author, filmmaker, BAFTA-winning screenwriter, and martial arts expert. You were an early pioneer of street fighting techniques for self-defense and are one of the highest-ranking martial arts instructors in Britain. You were also voted #1 self-defense author in the world and invited twice to teach for Chuck Norris in Las Vegas. Your first book, Watch My Back, was a Sunday Times bestseller and recounts your violent past as a nightclub bouncer in your hometown of Coventry. Since then, you've written almost 50 books, and your work has been featured in GQ, The Independent, The Guardian, and The Times. You have screenwritten 3 feature films and 7 shorts, starring actors like Ray Winstone and Orlando Bloom, with your second film, Brown Paper Bag, winning a BAFTA. Your latest book, 99 Reasons to Forgive, explores the life-changing power of forgiveness based on your own harrowing experiences and reminds everyone of the power they have within to change their lives for the better. Geoff, welcome back to London Real.
Sounds good when you say that. I sit around half the time, Brian, thinking I haven't done anything. I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
Then you read that, and it's sometimes it's good to remind yourself, isn't it, where you've been. But thank you for receiving my call and for letting me come on and talk about the book. I really appreciate it.
I'm super excited. You always have an open invitation here. You know that,
Thank you.
Geoff. And I just posted a picture today on social of the first time we met, which was over 10 years ago.
Wow.
For your first episode. And I didn't know much about you. I had heard you were this big, scary martial arts guy. And then along you walk in the door.
I know, yeah, that wasn't true, was it?
It's very interesting. You're such a fascinating, nuanced character. And so you came in the door and we talked a little bit about martial arts, but we talked a lot about the spirit.
Yeah.
And you always do that. You've had a fascinating past. I can't wait to get into the book. But maybe for people that don't know much about you, they probably just heard that intro and they're like, who is this guy? Who is Geoff Thompson? How do you tell people who you are in a couple minutes?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you can really, can you? I mean, and often that's been a problem with people when they've been promoting me. They don't really know what angle to come in at. But I was a kid that suffered with depression. I had this massive creative urge, but nowhere to put it. You know, I was abused when I was 11. That left me with quite a damaged schema. So I was quite afraid of the world. I really wanted to explore the world, but I was also afraid of the world. I didn't trust people. So I was this scared kid with this massive energy, this creative energy, and because I didn't find an outlet for it, it created like a log jam or like a root band. Later on, as the depressions got worse, you know, I can remember having one particularly bad depression when I was in my early 20s and thinking, I just can't live like this anymore. I can't live with this. This feeling came into my life like an egregore, like a spirit, and just took over. It just destroyed me, battered me. I didn't want to leave the bedroom. And then other times I didn't want to get out the covers, and the next minute I was smashing the house up in a rage. So I got this massive energy in me, but no outlet for it. I came from a working class background, which isn't important. I don't really think much about class other than the fact that I was conditioned to believe that this was my lot, and not just by the middle classes and the higher classes, but by my own class. You know, if you talked at all about wanting to do something creative, you know, they battered you like a beach seal. It's like, don't be pretentious, don't get above your station. Who do you think you are? You know, you're not anybody. I used to find myself going, oh, I know I'm not anybody. I know I'm not anybody. But of course, we all know we are. We all know we have a singularity. We have a geometric point, don't we? We have a soul, a self in there that is connected to everything, and it wants to explore. It wants to explore. It wants to trip the light fantastic. So there was just this one point where these depressions visited like a bullying stranger and came into my life and took over for a few months, and said, "We'll stay as long as we want, and we'll kick your door down, and we'll leave you frightened to leave the house. You'll be following your wife around the house like a puppet because you'll be so afraid. You'll be afraid to live." And I remember reaching this one point where I was terrified of my own biology. I got this massive energy, and because I didn't find an outlet, this energy grew voices. And obviously it attracted, it was like, this energy was spilling at me, so it attracted beast and fowl. I was attracting negative energies from everywhere. I was a shit magnet. So I got all this energy, and I remember this was probably my first connection with spirit, when I thought, I can't live like this anymore. I can't do this. I remember buying books and watching films and reading the blurb on stuff, and it would say, "This is how you overcome fear. This is how you overcome depression." And I'd read it. I'd come home with excited and thinking there's hope, and then I'd read it, and it was a lie. It wasn't telling the truth. It certainly, if they had the truth, they weren't telling it. They weren't courageous enough to tell it, or perhaps they couldn't articulate it, but it didn't give it me. And I realised later it was leading me to find it for myself. So this one particular time, I just thought, I am not living like this anymore. I'm going to do something about this. And boom, this concept nucleus, they would call it in Judaism, this idea fell into my mind about fear. I mean, the whole concept of a fear pyramid. Write down everything you're afraid of. Confront every fear. And just suddenly there was a light, curiosity. Curiosity, the brain can't process curiosity and fear at the same time. So I got this curiosity, and I thought, I'm going to confront everything I'm afraid of. So I got things like, I'm afraid of spiders, I'm afraid of dentists, I was afraid of going into karate tournaments. I was afraid of admitting that I was afraid. And I thought, well, I'll write those down. And so I wrote them down, and I started to confront the things I was afraid of, that I knew I was afraid of. And I realised as I did it, Brian, that they were placeholders. So behind those fears, I realised I wasn't really afraid of spiders. I was afraid of the physiology, the feelings of adrenaline. So I developed a desensitisation to the feelings. So I realised I didn't have control of my physiology. I had lots of poor conditioning. I had lots of old scars, lots of things that triggered adrenaline that would send me running. So I started to climb this fear pyramid. And confront one fear at a time. And as I confronted the fears, I realised there were fears below those fears. So there's a fear of my wife. I was absolutely afraid of my wife, and I didn't admit I was afraid. I used to just say anything for a quiet life. But if she said jump, I would say, do you mind if I finish the hoovering first? It was that kind of thing. I didn't like that feeling of conflict. I was afraid of my mother. I've never had a tattoo because I was afraid of my mother. I was afraid of my mother withdrawing love. I was afraid of success. I didn't know what success was. Where we grew up, success was like just some random, 6 or 7 figure deal for a book that you read about in the newspapers, or someone that has an amazing idea and makes a fortune from it. Just something random, but we didn't know what success was. So success frightened us, people from my class. And so when I started to write these things down, I was afraid of success. I was afraid of what success was. I didn't understand it. I was afraid of the rigour I'd have to do in order to understand success. I was afraid what success would do in my life. What happens if I become an author, Brian? Will my wife like that? My wife was terrified of my ambition. How would my friends feel if they're pissing in the trough next to someone that's on Richard and Judy? Yesterday he was just one of the guys, now he's on Richard and Judy. How will they cope with that? Not very well, as it turned out. People didn't cope with it, because suddenly I went from being Geoff the factory worker to, Geoff a published author, or Geoff, that's on the telly, or Geoff that's on the radio. And people didn't know how to, process that. And I started, so I got this fear pyramid, and I'm climbing up it, and I'm confronting all these things. So I suddenly become covered in tattoos, because I suddenly feel free. And what I realised, Ron, was I wasn't overcoming fears necessarily. I was finding fears, recognising that the fears contained energy and they blocked energy, or they contained light and they blocked light, or they contained consciousness and they blocked consciousness. They also processed consciousness. If I've got a block, if I've got a fear and light comes into me, or consciousness, it's going to go through the filter of that fear and project onto the world, from my fear. So if my life's a shitstorm, it's because it's coming through that filter. So when I removed that, when I overcame that fear, I converted the nature of the fear, and it was liberated, and the effulgence that was in the fear expanded into me, so I got a wider consciousness. I took away the negative filter, so I've got a cleaner filter, and I also made room. I created a vacuum. So there was a vacancy in me that was filled with consciousness. So every time I contracted by removing a fear, I expanded in consciousness. And consciousness is the spirit. It's living. It's panpsychic. It's got consciousness. So as the spirit expanded in me, the spirit started to work around like an antibody, getting rid of other fears. We can convert this fear. We can convert that fear. So and this has taken me a long time to fully understand. I wasn't overcoming a fear. As they say in the Bible, overcome evil with good. It means overcome ignorance with knowledge. It means overcome fear with consciousness, or overcome a demon with consciousness. So as I kept expanding, as I climbed up the pyramid, I was literally removing old filters, converting old fears, and making room for light. So I was growing exponentially. So the kid that was, scared to leave the house with all this block was suddenly like, it's like, boom, coming from here, from the dantian. My dantian was clear. Well, not completely clear, but clearer. And I was expanding. So I became almost unrecognisable. So I'd gone from this skinny, articulate, kind of slightly feminine, long-haired young guy to being this guy that's, wherever the fears are, I'm going to overcome them. Some of them were very subtle. So I started to challenge conditioning. Conditioning was a fear. I started to challenge perceptions, cognitions, precepts, concepts. As I started to get more energy, I could concentrate, and because normally our energy is dissipated, isn't it? It's in 10,000 things. So I was able to, this new energy, I was able to concentrate on what reality was. And I realised that the more consciousness I had, the freer I could be, because there's less rules. Suddenly I'm not a guy with a family that has to do a factory job. I'm a guy with skills and knowledge, and I can become a full-time trainer. People said to me, you can't train 3 times a day. I said, well, I'm training 2 or 3 times a day and doing a full-time job. So I said, I think I can. I think I can train full-time. I said, I worked on the building site carrying a hod. I said, believe me, you don't get much time to rest. I said, it is one of the most difficult jobs I've ever done. I'm pretty sure if I'm doing martial arts full-time, training with good people, I can train 3 times a day. So all of these beliefs I had were dissipating, and it's because of this pyramid. So with this pyramid, I'd learned to create, and again, I'm only understanding this now, Brian, I learned to create what they call in Judaism, I think it's Judaism or Islam, the isthmus, this filament or firmament, or this floating bridge between opposite energies. You've got a positive energy, a negative energy, and you place yourself between those two as a conductor, or as a separation or a connection, and you're able to create and harvest spirit, or tinctures of wisdom, or energy, or the philosopher's stone. There's a lot of different names for it. So I realised this pyramid I'd got, so if you imagine like a bulb, a light bulb, you've got a negative terminal, a positive terminal, a negative terminal, and then a filament between the two. And the light is created by the 2 forces becoming a 3rd force, which creates the 4th force of spirit. So that's what I was doing. So to fund that, or to make that work, I was burning up I was burning up my old fears, my old beliefs. That was the oil for the lamp. That was the concentrated consciousness being kind of used as fuel. So I was converting the negative into the positive. I mean, in simple terms, you want to go to the gym because you know it's good for you. You don't want to go to the gym because it's hard work and it's very difficult. Or you want to get up at 4 in the morning. We spoke about this before, but you know it's difficult to get up at 4 in the morning. When you place your soul or your will force between those two energies and you get up at 4 in the morning, you create light. You create light. And then once you've created light, you bring that light, you bring it through the body. So you're creating energy or harvesting energy, you're conserving it, you're training it, and then you're imposing it into the world. And whether you impose that, like if I can I just show you?
Yeah.
So if you just stand up, so whether you, so if I wanted to just from here, so if you're just there, or so I can go from here. See, I can put that energy into a tiny little punch, concentrated. Thank you. Or I can put it into a punch, or I can put it into health. I can put it into a relationship. I can put it into a business. I can put it into the imposition of hands, which is the transference of spirit. Well, this what they call the imposition of spirit, or the putting on of hands. So you can touch somebody and transfer that energy. And it's coming through positive filters because I've converted the negative filters into positive filters. So if you imagine like a cinema screen, most people are trying to fix their life at the level of the screen. But really, we need to go back to the projector. And if you've got a horror film going through the projector, no matter what you do to the screen, it's always going to be a horror film. So my job is to go in and change the film. That's the filters. That's the perceptions, the cognitions, the precepts, the concepts, the rules. So as you start getting higher in consciousness, literally by converting anti-consciousness with the antibody of spirit, there are less rules, because suddenly I don't have to go to work if I don't want to. I don't have to do 10 hours a day and retire at 65 with a shit pension, and the gold watch and nothing to do and not sure what to do. I can change all that because I can see that's possible, because as my consciousness expands, I think, well, that's possible. And then I go, well, I'm afraid to do that, because my wife says, what do you mean you want to give up your job and teach full time? What does that mean? How will you make money? I said, I'll make money from teaching. Well, what does that mean? So there's a cognitive dissonance. So my wife's afraid that I won't be able to make the rent. So I've got a lot of fear to stop me. So that goes on the pyramid. So the fear of becoming a full-time martial artist. You know how many times it took me to do that, to give up a job? It took me three goes. I gave up my job and was frightened back into conventional work. I gave up my job and found myself drifting back into conventional work. I gave up my job, running down the street at 6 in the morning, thinking, this is my job. I can't even believe this is possible. And I'm going and teaching in colleges and I'm thinking, this is my job. And I'm telling people how I did it and they're really interested. This is my job.
Is this before or after you were bouncing?
This was all the way through. So as I climbed the pyramid, my final fear on the pyramid wasn't the final fear, but it was the final fear on that pyramid was a fear of violent confrontation. So I got a job as a nightclub doorman, but by this time I'd expanded my consciousness. I'd become more aware. I'd given up my job working shifts. I was working on a building site, hod carrying. Then I took myself into college during this time and became a bricklayer, so I became skilled. So I built up my confidence, and then suddenly I was able to see that it was possible to stand on a nightclub door just to overcome this fear of confrontation. And also I wanted to see what martial efficacy was. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what worked and what didn't. Everyone was saying it's a block and a counter, it's a trap and a counter, it's about the grappling. They've all got these ideas, but listen, I was in a fight in a pub when I was 15 and I knew that there wasn't a place for all that. It was like a cartoon fight with clouds and arms and legs coming out. It was sporadic and spontaneous and ferocious. And if you fell on the floor, someone would jump on your head. It wasn't like the stuff I'd seen in the dojo.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.